Hey everybody, Rick Howard here. Check out the newest episode of CyberWire X from this past Sunday, where I'm joined by hash-table industry experts, as well as the founder and CEO of Plextrack, Dan DeClaus, where we all discuss pen testing. It's a really great episode, so make sure you don't miss it.
This episode of the CyberWire is made possible in part by Collide. Collide is an endpoint security solution that uses the most powerful untapped resource in IT, end users. Collide notifies your team via Slack when their devices are insecure and gives them step-by-step instructions to solve the issue. For IT admins, Collide provides a single dashboard that lets you monitor your entire fleet, whether they're running on Mac, Windows, or Linux. That visibility makes it easy to prove compliance to auditors. You can meet your compliance goals by putting users first. Visit collide.com/cyberwiredaily to find out how. County election workers find themselves targets of phishing. Impersonating Intrusion Truth. The LDS Church discloses data compromise. SpaceX asks for Starlink funding. Does Killnet have potential to do more damage? Deepen Desai from Zscaler on Joker, Facestealer and Coper banking malware on the Google Play Store. Our guest is Maxime Lamothe-Brassard of LimaCharlie to discuss how cybersecurity is following in the footsteps of software engineering. And the gamer's attack surface? It's big. Really big. It's big. Big. From the CyberWire studios at Data Tribe, I'm Dave Bittner with your CyberWire summary for Friday, October 14th, 2022. Researchers at Trellix have observed a spike in phishing emails targeting county election workers in Pennsylvania and Arizona ahead of the state's upcoming midterm elections. The emails are attempting to steal credentials or trick the users into downloading malware. The researchers note that an attacker could use this access to achieve several goals: election interference, collection of political intelligence, or conventional cybercriminal profit-taking through sale of stolen credentials. None of these, of course, are mutually exclusive goals. Researcher Dominic Alviere tweeted that an unknown group is impersonating Intrusion Truth in an attempt to misidentify APT-41 as an NSA operation. APT-41 is the Chinese threat actor that carries out state-directed operations while engaging in the occasional for-profit side hustle. It's not convincing. There's much mystery about APT-41. It's also known as Wicked Panda. They're not the NSA. And you can read all about them in the FBI's wanted poster, among other places, which comes complete with 5 mugshots of the Wicked Panda boys. Who is Intrusion Truth? It's an anonymous, so far unattributed group that for several years has devoted itself to outing Chinese cyber operators. The impersonation would seem to be a clumsy attempt to discredit both NSA and attribution of APT-41 to China. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints yesterday disclosed that it had detected in March unauthorized activity in certain computer systems that affected personal data of some church members, employees, contractors, and friends. The disclosure was delayed until this week at the request of law enforcement, who asked for the information to be held to protect the integrity of the investigation. It's not known publicly who was responsible for the intrusion, but the church's statement says U.S. federal law enforcement authorities suspect that this intrusion was part of a pattern of state-sponsored cyber attacks aimed at organizations and governments around the world that are not intended to cause harm to individuals. The church described the scope of the data exposure, stating, "The breached systems contained personal data, including basic contact information, of members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The data accessed may include, if you provided it, your username, membership record number, full name, gender, email address, birth date, mailing address, phone number, and preferred language. The affected data did not include donation history or any banking information associated with online donations. What the intruders wanted to gain from the compromise is unclear. Starlink founder Elon Musk tweeted last week that this operation, providing Starlink service to Ukraine, has cost SpaceX $80 million and will exceed $100 million by end of year. CNN now reports that Starlink has said it can no longer bear the cost out of pocket of delivering resilient internet service to Ukraine. The company has asked the U.S. Department of Defense for funding. SpaceX's Director of Government Sales wrote the department early in September to say, "We are not in a position to further donate terminals to Ukraine or fund the existing terminals for an indefinite period of time." There's no immediate word on the Pentagon's plans, but Starlink has become essential to Ukrainian command, control, and communications, and it seems unlikely at a time when Western material support for Ukraine is rising that the service will be permitted to lapse. Killnet, an auxiliary under the direction of Russian intelligence services, has so far shown itself capable of little more than minor DDoS operations and website defacements. But an essay in Cyber News argues that it would be a mistake to dismiss the group as unlikely to ever amount to more than a low-skilled collection of script kiddies. Killnet had been a known criminal group before turning its attention to operations designed to advance the cause of Russia. It was a botnet-for-hire operation, and the group's criminal background and the support of the Russian state suggests that it could be quickly augmented with the personnel and tools necessary to pose a more serious threat. On the other hand, of course, it's always possible that Killnet has peaked and won't get beyond its present punk-with-a-spray-can identity, hanging out on virtual street corners, sniping butts, and throwing rocks at cars. Let me ask if any of you are gamers. There's no shame in that. The New York Times has an appropriately lurid account of how the current enthusiasm for online gaming has translated into increased criminal activity in that corner of the world. So let's say you game, as the Times puts it, to cast spells, kill zombies, and compete as your favorite athletes. Maybe your guard is down because, after all, it's zombies. But the real hoods are up and active, given the sort of disinhibition one can feel in the middle of crushing it with Cascade Effect or even doing the Fortnite dance. Your attack surface can be as open as a biome in a spleef. The rise of in-game purchases has opened up opportunities for scam artists. The amounts are often small, a few dollars, even a few cents, but as is so often the case with scams, the secret is, as Crazy Eddie used to say, volume. Who's going to think it worth their while to investigate the loss of 60 cents, one father of a disappointed Roblox purchaser pointed out to the Times. But the gaming world has bigger risks. Consider cheat codes, popular among the competitive but lazy segment of the gaming community. The Times summarizes some conclusions from Kaspersky, stating, "Criminals can use fake cheat programs to disable a target's computer and steal information." In Kaspersky's analysis of threats to 28 popular games, the company found thousands of files of this type, which affected more than 13,600 people from July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2022. So, game with caution, friends, and don't cheat, and stay in school. After the break, Deepen Desai from Zscaler on malware on the Google Play Store. Our guest, Maxime Lamothe-Brassard of LimaCharlie, discusses how cybersecurity is following in the footsteps of software engineering. Stay with us. And now, a word from our sponsor, SpyCloud. SpyCloud constantly recovers and analyzes new data from the criminal underground, a a realm packed with credentials, personal information, passwords, and customer information exposed in third-party data breaches, combo lists, and malware infections. With SpyCloud, you now have access to this data that historically has not been available and can take preventative efforts to defend your business against costly cyber attacks and hard-to-detect fraud that can negatively impact your bottom line and brand reputation. Visit spycloud.com/cyberwire to learn how to make recaptured data your best defense. That's spycloud.com/cyberwire. And we thank SpyCloud for sponsoring our show. And now, a word from our sponsor, Recorded Future. Staying one step ahead of the rapidly evolving threat landscape requires a constant flow of daily intelligence. To stay up to date on everything happening in the world of cybersecurity, join over 50,000 other security professionals who subscribe to the Cyber Daily. With daily email updates on the latest cybersecurity news, top threat actors, exploited vulnerabilities, suspicious IP addresses, and more, the Cyber Daily is the first thing security professionals check every morning. To learn more and subscribe for free, go to recordedfuture.com/cyber-daily. And we thank Recorded Future for sponsoring our show. Maxime Lamothe-Brassard is CEO and co-founder at security infrastructure as a service provider LimaCharlie. I spoke with him about his notion that the cybersecurity of tomorrow will look a lot like the software engineering of today.
We talk about software engineering really because that field has had a similar kind of trajectory as an industry. What I mean by this is there was a point where software development or software products, the industry of building software, was a very highly specialized one. And it was very inaccessible, right? You had a lot of product that were sort of in the boxed software kind of realm. You wanted a database, you had to go and buy the shiny box database from one of the three vendors that had, the secret sauce to do database in the world, in enterprise space. And what happened is that the industry matured a whole lot. And people started really understanding the big pieces, the big underpinning concepts that allowed for what modern software development is, which is, hey, all of a sudden, everybody knew what a relational database was. Everybody knew what a virtual machine was, what, maybe a load balancer was. So people really got to the point where a lot of those concepts were very well understood by everybody in the industry. And as that happened, what we saw was kind of the AWS come through. And AWS, I think, for me, is like a catalyst of modern software development, where we're saying, hey, if you're doing software development, you don't have to rebuild every single piece at every, single kind of company where you're building software, but instead you're able to reuse the parts that everybody understands how to build them. And as you do that is how you get to the point where, you can start reasoning around software development kind of in the modern enterprise in really nice ways, because you're demystifying a lot of the big underlying components. So now you're able to plan how you're going to do a certain product, explain it to people in different industries, explain it to leadership, and then produce a repeatable process around that. So all this to say, security, I think, is getting to that same kind of spot where security is no longer, the really kind of arcane knowledge that a couple of people possess and people aren't talking and, everybody thinks about it differently. But rather now people are getting to the point where we have things like the MITRE framework, right? The MITRE attack framework, which is a common way for everybody to think about security and the types of attacks, the types of techniques and threats. And as we're putting those pieces of shared understanding in the industry, right, at the core of everything that we do, now we are getting to the point where we can start talking about how we're going to defend against a specific attack, how we're going to detect it, what it looks like, how it can be tested against, right? Which is kind of one of the really core things in software development. And as you put those pieces of the puzzle kind of all in a line, what you end up with is a very similar kind of mentality to software development, where we're able to, hey, let's start planning about what things need to be done, how we're going to do these things, how they're going to work together to be assembled, what's the outcome going to be, and how we're going to keep that process going into the future to make sure that, we keep a lot of the value that we build and we test against it. So it's kind of a long answer to say that really it's just a similar kind of trajectory that leads to a more mature industry, how we reason about security.
It strikes me that these sort of transformations can often happen in fits and starts. And, I've heard several people say that we really need to shed this kind of rock star mentality where, there are some cybersecurity superstars out there, names we all know. But if we're going to reach a level of professionalization, we can't continue down that path. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
It's a very interesting question. I think that's a partially correct statement. Here's what I mean. Those rock stars, right, I think are a symptom, positively, I mean that, of the fact that a lot of people in cybersecurity came to cybersecurity because of passion, because it was a field where they could really push the boundaries, do, more different things, really cool things, kind of go outside the envelope, the challenge. So all those positive feelings, I think, are very precious. And it's a great thing for us as an industry to try to keep those, right? I think that's the positive side of what we want to keep. Now, where that statement is correct is that we want to move past that point so that we're not just relying on this idea of, I have 3 different people and they're amazing. How exactly? Well, they're doing a bunch of different things. That's good, but that does not make, to this point, a reliable, well understood path to becoming more secure, right? It's not a reproducible process. It's one that can work in some cases, but not everybody can have that. So I think where the sweet spot is for us is to be able to keep growing the maturity in terms of repeatability and kind of the software engineering approach to things, and really define that as the framework by which we want to grow. And then I think, in my opinion, what it means is that those rock stars are, I'll kind of shift that in terms of saying those very passionate people are able to still, tap into that passion and drive a lot of value, but to do it in a way that very predictably benefits the company.
That's Maxime Lamothe-Brassard from LimaCharlie. There's a lot more to this conversation. If you want to hear more, head on over to the CyberWire Pro and sign up for Interview Selects, where you'll get access to this and many more extended interviews. And joining me once again is Deepen Desai. He is the Chief Information Security Officer and Vice President of Security Research and Operations at Zscaler. Deepen, it is always great to welcome you back to the show. I wanted to touch base with you today on some stuff that you and your colleagues are tracking. This is some malware on the Google Play Store. What are you all looking at here?
Thank you, Dave. Yes, so we have a mobile and IoT threat team that is continuously tracking different sources for threat actors trying to push those mobile malware onto the devices, user devices. So as part of that tracking activity, we do monitor apps that are being downloaded through our cloud from even official locations like Google Play Store. So in the recent research, we talk about 3 different families for which we observed the apps making it on the Google Play Store. And there were more than 300,000 downloads combined that we observed for these apps, which were actually malicious in nature.
Well, let's go through them one at a time here. What were you all looking at?
Yeah, so there were 3 different families involved. The very first one is a fairly prominent malware family. It's the Joker Malware. It's known to target Android devices, and despite public awareness of this particular family, it keeps finding its way into Google's official app store by regularly modifying the malware's trace signatures. So including things like how do they update their codes, execution methods, and payload retrieving techniques. So that's Joker Malware. The second one that we noticed was a Facestealer malware that's specifically targeting Facebook login credentials. And then the third one is Coper, which is a banking Trojan that's targeting various banking applications in Europe, Australia, and South America.
Are there any things that stand out about these 3? Anything particularly clever about the way that they're going about getting themselves onto the Play Store?
Yeah, I'll mention a few things here. I mean, look, Google is doing a great job of tracking this, wetting it in their sandbox, and they do, end up removing hundreds, if not thousands of these before they ever before they ever show up on the Play Store. But there are these more sophisticated family that continue changing their tactics. So one of the technique that we've seen being more and more successful is where they're pushing this initial app, which is then known to download stage 2 payload from a different location, right? And that location may be serving something completely benign until the app is live on Google Play Store. Right? So the payload retrieving technique. In fact, we saw as part of the code itself where they will check, is the app live on Google Play Store? And if the answer is yes, then the download that will result from the destination will be actually Joker Malware payload. So that's one of the things that we're seeing being fairly successful in evading some of the checks that are being performed. The second thing is where they will continue to segment the code, obfuscate the code, and change the execution flow as well to kind of match at times some of the legitimate applications. And that's where probably it's, again, getting through those static analysis modules that might be running on Google's side. One thing I'll mention, though, we've discovered, say if I were to talk about the Joker payload, we saw more than 50 different Joker downloader apps in Play Store. As soon as we reported to the Android security team, they were fairly quick in taking those down, right? So the response time, the tracking time is very good from Google's part.
What is an Android user to do here? I mean, obviously, the Google Play Store is... as in terms of sourcing your apps, is a relatively safe place to do this. Are there any additional steps people should be taking to help protect themselves against these sorts of things?
Yeah, so sticking to the official Play Store is always the first thing. I mean, yes, some of these apps were found on Google Play Store, but still, that's very, very safe compared to third-party app stores where chance of you hitting one of these malicious apps will be much higher. So that's number one. Number two is, it's always a good idea to do second level check where, install apps that have very high install numbers, relatively positive reviews. The developer is a known developer as well. So having that second level check done always helps for the end users, especially if the app is asking for a lot of permissions. One permission that I'll mention for the listeners, a very important one. Don't grant notifications listener permissions, right? And escalated accessibility permissions to apps that you don't fully trust. The notifications listener service specifically enables the application to be added to enabled notification listener provider. And in simple terms, what this means is this app will be able to read notification, and it includes critical access notifications like auto-generated one-time passwords and PIN codes, right? So they're able to bypass two factors if you give that level of permission to some of these untrusted apps.
All right. Well, good advice as always. Deepen Desai, thanks for joining us. We want to thank our sponsor, Keeper Security, for helping make this episode possible. Keeper is the world's most secure password manager for organizations. And that's the CyberWire. For links to all of today's stories, check out our daily briefing at thecyberwire.com. Be sure to check out this weekend's Research Saturday and my conversation with Brigitte O'Gorman from Symantec's Threat Hunter team. We're discussing Noobs ransomware. DarkSide and Black Matter successor continues to evolve its tactics. That's Research Saturday. Check it out. The CyberWire podcast is proudly produced in Maryland out of the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technologies. Our amazing CyberWire team is Elliot Kautzman, Trey Hester, Brandon Karp, Eliana White, Peru Prakash, Liz Irvin, Rachel Gelfin, Tim Nodar, Joe Kerrigan, Carol Terrio, Maria Varmatzis, Ben Yellen, Nick Valecki, Gina Johnson, Bennett Moe, Catherine Murphy, Chris Russell, John Petrick, Jennifer Iben, Rick Howard, Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Fittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here next week. MISI, the Maryland Innovation and Security Institute, is hosting Cyber Saturday focused on industrial control systems October 15, 2022 at their headquarters facility in Columbia, Maryland. They invite all students in 6th grade through college sophomores interested in learning about cybersecurity, ICS, SCADA, penetration testing, software development, and more for a fun-filled day of hands-on exercises and activities. Come turn out the lights on the critical infrastructure city, program a robot, capsize a boat, alter their IoT HomeKit, and much more. For more information, visit misiacademy.tech, and we thank Maryland Innovation and Security Institute for sponsoring our show.